Jack, what's going on, man?
Not much. Just wearing matching shirts today.
Just wearing matching shirts. We didn't even
Comment down below
know.
who's wearing it better.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty easy. I don't really think we need to turn to the chat, but
Wow.
I mean we can if you want to.
Age
Figured we
before
had
beauty. I get it.
color before age.
We can keep going, and we don't have to. What's new?
Not a whole lot. I now have 2 damaged hands, so that's making life fun at the moment.
What caused the damage?
Going up to Denver both times. So last month when I went up to Denver, I still have no idea what actually happened, but this area just instantly started swelling up in the middle of a match, and it's been hurting ever since, but slowly getting better. And then when I was out there, when was that? A couple weeks ago. Yeah, beginning of this month. I made it almost all the way through my entire match and hit one move at the end, and this thumb bent in a direction that it's not supposed to bend. And so yeah, that's been significantly more painful.
I didn't know karate chopping was a part of your battle repertoire.
Neither did my thumb.
Well, that would have been fun more. I could see you doing that, like taking someone
Like a
down.
roundhouse coming from
I'm
here
gonna
all the way.
headlock if you let me win.
That's basically how that conversation went. And then he tried to go back on his word, so that's where the thumb chop came into play.
That's really too bad.
Yeah. But anyway, this is Made of Metal. This is where Jack and I come on every week or so, and we talk about fun exercise, fun nutrition things, and chats live on Facebook, chats live on YouTube, not quite Instagram yet, but I'm working those kinks out. That should be coming very soon. In the meantime, on those 2 platforms, if you are here live, drop a chat. We'll respond. We'll let you know. You can drop questions at any point, and we'll pop it on the screen. We'll talk about it. What's new with you, Jack?
A couple things. Well, first of all, I was flossing last night, as everyone should, and my crown popped out, hit the sink, hit the tub, scattered, looking for my tooth. So I got that taken care of today. So my tooth is back in. Other than that, today was a really cool day in the gym because it was like a clear. I think I texted you earlier in the week too. In the last 2 weeks, strength is just like it's a rocket ship. Everything's going really well in programming right now. So today was another one of those days another day to celebrate and hold those days tight because you don't have them all the time. You have them pretty consistently, but
you can have them more if you spend the summer training for a 50K and then do that 50K. When you come back, you'll get strong as shit real fast.
I don't know what it is. I'm stronger than I have been in a long time. You got to run. I think that's what it is. You have to run. I'm telling you. Train for a 50K. Start lifting again.
That still doesn't incentivize me to go run especially for a 50K.
It shouldn't. No, but it is like when we were texting. It's like like the first couple of weeks, you start feeling strength come back. You get like a month or 2 in, all of a sudden it's like, okay, like we're back. I think what did I text you? I pretty much went to bench. Had squatted and then went to bench at like 240 cold, pretty much. Like no warm up, just threw it on and did it. Everything felt great. So it's really cool to do that and then know that there's so much more left in the tank.
Yeah.
So next week will be different with holidays and not being at my normal gym, but we will see.
It'll be a good time. I believe in you.
Thank you.
I have not been running at all very much outside of the wrestling ring. Yeah, and it's been a good life.
I haven't been running either, just so you know.
You're making up for all the running by completely not running.
Ellen continues to run like when the weather cooperates enough.
Yeah,
so she's running probably 2, maybe 3 times a week right now. I have run once since we did the 50K.
That tracks. That's one more time than I would go running after I did a 50K.
Mm-hmm. I'm good. I'm good until spring.
Like I did that string of state fair shows in September, and I think I'm just now in a place where I'm like, okay, I want to wrestle again.
That was your sprint. That was your long run.
Yeah, like after the state fair ended until this past weekend, I did not want to wrestle. I was over it. And now I'm like, all right, let's go.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
All right, shall we get into it?
Let's get into it. What are we talking about this week?
All right, so it's been a topic that Tony and I have been throwing around a little bit and just kind of discussing, but RFK Jr. Bringing in the Maha, Make America Healthy Again. I think there's
a type of fish.
Mahi Mahi. Yeah. It's one of those things that I think is much needed. There are there holes in it for sure. But that's one of the things we wanted to dive into today. And I know Mr. Davis over here, have you ever seen Hercules and seen Hades with his flame hair? We might get the different ethnical experience of Hades today. But
I don't know what you mean. I don't know. This is
you're not blue. You're not blue. Let's just put it that way.
This is a completely neutral topic for me.
It's already starting to lean. So anyway, what is Make America Healthy Again? We'll run over the overall vision that RFK and anyone else that's behind him, what they're looking to do in the grander scheme of things, and then dive into what they're looking to do to reduce chronic diseases, shifting towards more sustainable and health promoting food systems, among other things. So it's kind of the lay of the land for today. So the first thing we'll jump into are the proposed changes. So do you want to kick off with looking at incorporating more restriction on ultra processed foods and ingredients?
Yeah, we can jump into that. So one of the first proposed changes from RFK as he's coming into this position next year is he wants to restrict ultra processed foods and additives. So he's basically trying to make a push for stricter regulations on those things, on food additives, on dyes, on preservatives, and obviously the goal behind that is to reduce the consumption of those foods to improve overall health. Right? That's without going into specifics about these specific ingredients or chemicals or anything like that. That's essentially the crux of that argument. This is my high level issue with this. I'm a huge fan of fitness. I'm a huge fan of health. I'm a huge fan of eating well, of going to the gym, of getting stronger. What I don't like at all is the idea of legislating it. So I don't like the idea of somebody coming in, and I don't care what color tie he's wearing. That's irrelevant. But the second you walk in and you start trying to force people to go one way or the other, now I got issues, because the simple fact of it is now we are supposed to listen to this person, or potentially a team of people that are behind them. But we're now beholden to them and their understanding of the things that they're talking about, whether or not it's accurate. And maybe it is, maybe it's not. That's not even a discussion for another day. We're probably going to talk about that a little bit today. But overall, it's, if you go back a couple of decades, salt was the bad guy, and if you talk to some people, salt is still the bad guy. And so it led to this wave of low salt foods, and it led to this wave of salt alternatives, right? Like potassium chloride that you can get. They call it no salt. It's just salt with something besides sodium as the key element that it's paired with, which is fine. But I mean, imagine if that was legislated and we somehow banned salt. We made salt illegal to use in food, right? Sodium chloride and specifically. And then we come back later and we realize, oh, wait a minute, salt really isn't an issue. In fact, pushing people to have less salt is doing more harm than good. So how do we know that's not going to happen with anything that RFK is talking about now in another 20, 30 years from here? Like 2050 comes by and we're like, oh, as it turns out, that really wasn't worth the struggle that we poured into it. It really wasn't worth all the stress that we put into trying to get rid of these things or legislate them in any way. And that's, this is and really anything else that we're going to talk about falls into that same umbrella of, yeah, okay, ultra processed foods, there's people that can show that it leads to obesity, it leads to heart issues, it leads to, all these things. And it's like, okay, that's fine, you can see that, but what about the people that can have those foods and have none of those issues? So are we going to penalize those people because of other people having negative effects from foods that may or may not actually be because of the ingredient, and is more likely to be because of the fact that they're just having way too much food in general, not just of red dye, whatever number it is, but it's the fact that they're having 4,000 calories and they are moving, according to our new daily average of steps, 3,500 steps a day. That actually went down, by the way. So when we're considering that obesity is going up, maybe instead of demeaning artificial sweeteners and food dyes and whatever else, maybe consider the fact that we're moving less while eating more. Maybe it really is that simple, and the solution is to just take a little shred of accountability over what you're putting in your body and what you're asking your body to do or not do. And it's not saying you have to go run a 50K. You don't have to be Jack and spend the summer running a 50K. You don't even have to do what I do and go to the gym 3 times a week and lift weights, but just get that step average up.
Mm-hmm.
And pay attention to the amount of food you eat. You don't have to eat 1,200 calories. I'm not going to say that, but just look at what you're eating, scale it back 20% if you're struggling with your weight, and just watch what happens. That's all. Just watch what happens.
And this is gonna be like an overarching theme. Like, I couldn't agree more with everything that you've said. There's a lack of education with nutrition among professionals, among the lay person. Um, so that's something to consider. Like, if you knew more about something, you would know what to do with it, right? So we have a lot of people that are going off of what the government said was right, when the government owns and operates or is paid off by, or vice versa, by these big companies that want to sell XYZ product. So then all of a sudden that's what they start pushing. And then that's what our education becomes. So we
Yeah.
lean on this. Oh, the government cares for us. They want blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it's a weird, corrupt business.
Yeah,
Again,
the
no matter
government's a
what
business. That's
side
all it
you
is.
wear. So, you know, it would be nice to be able to completely count on government for food advice, but you have to look at the people. Are first of all, are they healthy? Are they educated? Like, actually educated? And who are they getting in to promote their program? So
Yeah.
is
And
this
this
any
is
different than,
and that's the sort of dangerous aspect of this, because if you look at RFK, you're like, well, he's actually in pretty good shape.
Mhm.
So maybe he knows what he's talking about. And maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But what I'll ask, instead of whether or not we should remove food dyes and artificial sweeteners and seed oils and whatever else is going to come up as the next bad guy, uh, what I will ask is, if RFK is focusing on avoiding certain types of foods, irrespective of whatever particular chemical, irrespective of whatever food dyes, but just realizing that those tend to end up in foods that have a higher calorie density. They're usually in cereals, they're usually in chips, they're usually in cookies, they're usually in foods that have a lot of calories. If he avoids those foods, is he likely to be in better shape because he got rid of the chemical, or is he likely to be in better shape because he's typically eating foods that have less calories per gram and he's probably not overeating on calories?
that was our big discussion between you and I. Or like, you brought it up initially. It was like, yeah, a great idea, but it's like, are the health outcomes actually going to be any different?
Yeah.
If people do
And
these things, is the health outcome going to be any different?
yeah,
Because as we know as coaches, removing something to remove something doesn't necessarily solve the problem at hand. It's an
just look at prohibition.
application and habit.
Yeah. Because if we come on here, Jack, if we come on here and we just say 4 words, everybody will know exactly without actually pointing to anything specific. People will have a picture in their mind. If I come on here, or if you come on here and we say, stop eating shit food, everybody will have an idea, a long list of things that fills that list of shit food. And if you go to most people's pantries, guess what's in those pantries?
Shit.
Those shit foods. Now, we didn't have to educate them on what those shit foods were. We just said, don't eat shit foods. They already know what those are. So why do they have them? So is the problem education? To a point, yes. Because when you really get down into the nuance, you understand my ultimate goal, my ultimate viewpoint when it comes to good food versus bad food, right? Like I don't necessarily buy into that.
Same.
But if we switch the definition of shit foods to mean foods that have a high calorie density, right? So not inherently bad, they just happen to have more calories per gram, right? And that's a much fairer assessment of those foods. But if we still use that, people will still know what those foods are. And realizing that those foods are higher calorie density and they should be eaten less, if not at all, depending on the person, then why are people still eating them? Yet the education's not the entire issue. It's not even, I would say it's not even top 3 because people know that I hear it every wrestling show. I hear it every wrestling show when I'm walking around with a slice of pizza. I can't believe you're eating that.
Yeah, because they don't understand how it works into your daily caloric budget. They don't really
Correct.
understand how it works into the balance of how you consume food, the balance of how you move your body regularly, balance of your mental state, as far as your view of yourself, your view of the world. Like it goes so much deeper. And that's something that, again, the government is going to try to just go from the top down and say, well, if we do this, it's going to solve everything. And everyone underneath the umbrella in the shade goes, oh, it's so nice. There's no rain here. We'll
Yeah.
follow that. And it's like,
Except for the fact that they did that with fat, they did that with carbs, they did that with protein for a little while, they did that with processed foods already once before. They did that with salt. And what did that change about people's overall eating habits? Oh, nothing.
it just continues to get worse.
It just continues on the same increasing path that it's been on since the 60s.
This was something kind of, it's just like, again, you look at some of these stats, it's fucking crazy. But it's like 50% of children, so right, 17 to 0, are obese or overweight. It's and then you think the trickle down. We'll keep moving on this, but people do the best they can with the knowledge that they have, right? And that kind of gets passed down. Habits get passed down. So is it the food that's the problem, or is it people's understanding, application, and other habits outside of the ultra processed food? Because we both consume ultra processed foods
Yeah.
regularly.
Well, how many times have you been at a potluck or some sort of event like that where you've got somebody that's like, wow, this cupcake is terrible for me as they take a bite?
Yeah.
If it's really that bad for you, which again, by the
You,
way, I don't
you,
believe it is, but if you really believed it was so bad for you, why are you eating it?
yeah, they don't even believe what they're saying themselves because they don't fully understand it. It's just, they're hyper sensitive to what it looks like to have a cupcake in your hand
Yeah. Yeah. That's
and
why
insecure about it.
we've made it. It's been 20 minutes. We're already off the rails.
All
Not
right.
even a little bit on. We're completely off at this point.
Yeah, I think there's a clear understanding of like what this means. There's a lot more discussion to be had. The government's going to oversimplify it and be like, "This is the answer. Follow us." And it's like, yeah, but is it actually going to change the health outcomes?
I
History
doubt
says no.
it. I doubt it.
History says no. I
Yeah.
don't think this is any different. If we were doing this call when the food pyramid came out and we had the knowledge we have now, we'd be saying the same shit. We'd go, this is fucked. Like
Yeah.
they're trying to systematize something that they don't even know about. They don't have studies to back it up.
Although I do think the food pyramid was valid when it came out because we were a far more industrialized nation or far less industrialized.
Yeah.
And that was back at a time when we needed more energy because we didn't the average job wasn't sitting in front of a screen for 8 hours a day.
No, it's manual
The
labor.
average job was going, yeah, manual labor. So we needed the energy.
Yeah.
And as that changed, the food pyramid never changed to keep up with it. And so yeah, that's where that went. And so now it's terrible. It's a terrible model for 99% of people to follow.
And we think of the level of additional convenience that's been added. You don't have to travel more than a mile to find a McDonald's for most people. I shouldn't say a mile, maybe 3 to 5. But just there's a lot less physical activity. We'll keep going. I think people get the gist.
Yeah.
One of the other big ones too is reforming school lunches because a lot of that is government funded. So basically, removing processed foods, and then replacing with fresh, more locally sourced foods, which I think is super cool.
Yeah.
As far as
That one
getting
I actually like.
foods, I mean, not even getting rid of the process, but just minimizing it. But from that sustainable long-term view, the kids, I mean, if it tastes halfway decent, a kid's gonna eat it, and it's free, which I think is great for maybe struggling families or families that lack the education. At least the kids getting vegetables and high quality food put in front of them regularly, whether they're eating it or not, they're around it. So the hope is that influences them down the road to make different decisions. Just because out of habit, this is what they always had for lunch. Maybe that transfers over when they become an adult and they're more independent.
Yeah.
That
That one, yeah. That one I'm far less fiery about. I actually I actually agree with that one. Because it makes sense, right? It's when you do have an opportunity to affect change and especially typically, right, a younger population where they are going to be more impressionable, it makes sense to then set a groundwork for them where they can have higher quality foods, lower calorie foods. But I also think part of it that happened again, it's a sketchy area because then you walk into the area of like, oh, do you want to legislate that too? And I don't really want to legislate this either. But I think that would work best paired with some sort of education program that says like, hey, how do you feel? Like the reason you feel this way is because of this food, or the reason that you felt like this over the weekend is because you ate these foods instead, and help kids connect those dots.
I have to think at some level as well. I made that statement before, is like 50% of children are overweight or obese. I have to think that if there was more whole foods in front of them, right? The whole foods are more nutrient dense and in most cases less calorically dense, like ultra processed foods are. Ultra processed foods are not as filling in most cases, but they have more calories and not necessarily more nutrients. Some of them, right, you can fortify a lot, but I have to think if the kids were eating it, technically we're putting them in a little bit more. If they were overeating before and after school, outside of school, they're in more of a caloric deficit because they're eating these whole foods compared to if they ate processed foods for 2-3 meals out of the day, opposed to just those 1 or 2. So that's something else. It's like we can't pin it precisely, but it's really like food's not that much more expensive. Like higher quality food's not that much more expensive. It's a shelf life thing. I know that for a
Yeah,
fact.
more than anything, sure.
I still think that's workable. You think of the amount of money that's moving. They could.
I can go to the grocery store right down the street and I can get bananas for 58 cents a pound.
Yeah,
And
that's several bananas.
that's about given the size of the bananas that are there now, that's 2 bananas. So if you want to have 1 banana a day, that's 7 bananas. That's 3.5 pounds at 50 cents, 58 cents. That's $2.
It's not.
So
It's not.
what are we talking about? Yeah, if you go with the organic ones, sure, they're going to cost more, but guess what? That doesn't mean they're automatically healthier just because they're organic.
No, half the organic stuff is still getting sprayed. It's just getting sprayed with different stuff too. That's
Yeah, they just get sprayed with stuff that's on a different list.
It's on the less bad list.
That's all it is. They just get sprayed with things that are on a different list that haven't been vilified yet, if they're going to be vilified at all.
Right.
That's it. Like people have this thought that, oh, it's organic. It doesn't get sprayed with pesticides. Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Sure does. In fact, more pesticides because since it's not being bred the way that GMOs are, they are more attractive to bugs. So they have to be sprayed more heavily to keep them away.
Yeah, it's more susceptible. So even if, yeah, it's getting sprayed with the less aggressive whatever, but it's getting sprayed more volume or more frequently and more volume. So unless you've got,
Unless you're
organic,
growing them yourself.
yeah, and you're doing it yourself in your backyard, you have full control over everything.
Yeah.
I don't want to say you can't win, but it's just a lot more difficult because you have to consider like 99.9% of crops are sprayed. Because again, it is a bit
I think
farmers and a
the
bit
win might be like a local farmers market because they're probably going to be way more in the idea of like using no pesticides.
I would
And
agree.
so obviously when you cut out, all the transportation infrastructure and all that stuff around like displaying it and store costs and everything, you cut all that out. That's now cost that ideally you wouldn't have to pay. So you're paying directly to the producer. So it might, that might offset the cost, right?
Sure. It's an interesting one. To me, it's a no-brainer to reform school lunches or even just start making changes, right? Because we know that sometimes the stuff takes years to do. It's like start removing some of the actual bullshit, start reducing the use,
Or, and I know this is crazy, or get the kids to move more.
Right. And we know recesses have been being snagged from a lot of programs because they want kids to get more different education, which require
Wait
them
a minute. So we had this food pyramid that was created decades ago when people were more active and people stopped being as active, but the food pyramid never changed and people gained weight. And then we had these school lunches that were fine for the longest time. And then kids stopped being as active because recess was getting taken away and they're sitting in their desks more and now in front of computers. And now they're also gaining weight while their activities being dropped. Weird.
And
That's so weird. And their food is getting more calories.
ADHD prescriptions have skyrocketed. Same thing with, those diagnoses. I really don't think it's any coincidence because we started removing activity and the food, whether the food changed or not, we started removing activity. That has an effect.
I don't have any kids. Jack, you don't have any kids.
No.
But we've both been in restaurants and seen the kid that the parents trying to like get to stay in place. And it really doesn't work that well. It's almost like kids and it's almost like humans in general were designed and made to move. And if you let the body move, most everything else would almost autocorrect.
I agree, but we're in an echo chamber between you and I on that specific topic.
It's true.
But again, that we know when it comes down to energy balance and mental clarity and anger and frustration, all those things, like it's no different for a kid. They need to move more. As we get older, we get more and more conditioned that certain things are normal, certain things are okay. So then our mind and our body follow suit. That's why Tony and I do what we do, because we help people get out of that because they get to a point that they can't figure it out. And we help them get back to like more of like that human like tendency to eat more appropriate food and have more appropriate activity goals. And then magically their body composition and their health improve. It's crazy. On top of their performance.
Yeah. All of a sudden they're sleeping easier. All of a sudden their moods are better balanced. All of a sudden their joint pains that have been around for 10, 12, 15 years are starting to go away. All of a sudden they don't get as sick as often. All of a sudden all these things magically happen. It's so weird.
Their self-image, their confidence, relationships. Like, it's cool stuff, but it's far overcomplicated.
Yeah.
So if you can take anything from that, I think simplifying is the way to go.
Yeah. And
So
next on our list is kind of along those lines, but it's basically talking about revising dietary guidelines, and it's discussing plans to basically change the dietary guidelines for Americans to focus more on whole foods and sustainable agriculture. And this is another one that falls under the sounds great on paper category, because we've been doing that. We've been updating the guidelines, and there's been no change in people's overall eating habits. We've been updating exercise guidelines, and there has been an inverse change in people's activity, as our average step count has gone down, but our average activity recommendations have gone up.
Mhm.
So it sounds great on paper, but my question is, what do you like? What is it? What is this change going to do differently than all the other changes that came before it? Because we don't have the same dietary guidelines from arbitrarily 1943. They've been changed, right? They changed when we thought fat was the bad guy. They changed when we thought carbs were the bad guy. They changed when we thought protein was the bad guy for those 45 minutes. They change regularly, and nothing in society changes to reflect the changes that are coming down these pipelines. So what's different about this time?
And the other thing too is, like, if something were to change, we won't really know if it's working for another decade or 3 if it stays in legislation the way that they're proposing it. Like, we're not gonna know for a long time, and then on top of that, tack on another decade to look at studies and health outcomes and all those kinds of things. Like, we're not gonna get the information, which is fine. That's part of,
It's part of
change.
science.
Change doesn't, yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in 5, 10 years. Um, I like the idea of going to, like, more sustainable agriculture when they're looking at changing those guidelines, but I don't see a system that big shifting anytime soon. And as much as RFK and his crew want to, howl at the moon that this is the only thing that's going to work, the other governing bodies, the other businesses, the farmers, like, the farmer is going to get their teeth kicked in no matter what, but it's a business for everyone, right? Like, the farmer's arm is getting bent behind their back, but everyone else is like, well, how can we make the money? How can we promote this product so we can use this? And then we need this much yield out of this much land. It's going to take time. And I think it's like, for more sustainable agriculture, there would have to be, like, way more rogue farmers. And they're never going to outnumber the industrial cropping to influence higher up the consumption chain.
Yeah. Well, part of the issue is, if you were to move to sustainable agriculture, whatever that means, right? Another blanket term that doesn't really have a clear definition. It's like clean eating. But we'll just assume that it means farmed in a way that the land isn't destroyed, however, whatever way they imagine that it is. And maybe it is, maybe it's not, right? It's a conversation for another day. The issue is, typically what's going to happen is there's going to be less yield at the farm. It's not going to produce as much food, which means, even if you cut out the fact of less food, so potential food shortage there, even if you skip past that, Now, because there's a less yield, one, there's less yield overall. Two, we're also assuming they're probably using, again, we're not doing GMOs, so we're doing more organically grown crops, which means not as much of it's going to make it to the grocery store because it doesn't last as long. More of it's going to get attacked by bugs. So there's going to be less of it that makes it to the store. So to compensate for all of that, price will go up.
I was just gonna say,
And
it's like, what are the subsidies for? I mean, there's probably some out there, but it's like it's more expensive just in general for the farmer to get to the point of actually having growth, and then and then picking up where you're at, right? Then they have to sell it because their bottom line is completely different now.
yeah, because now, they're again, the farmers, they run businesses too. They're trying to make a certain amount of money. So if you want to make $100 and you have 100 ears of corn to sell, you sell them for $1 a pop. But if now half of your crop's being taken away for all sorts of different reasons, right? It just doesn't last long enough. Bugs are getting to it. You have a freeze or you just have an unexpected swing in temperature. So now you've lost a wave of your crop and you're just down 50%. Now those ears of corn are now $2 a pop because the farmer's still trying to get to 100. And so the same thing would happen if we made this switch to, again, sustainable agriculture, whatever that means. And people already don't want to pay prices now for conventionally grown food without switching to organic because both of those are apparently expensive. So how are we going to make both of those more expensive? Again, we'll assume that we're probably going to get rid of conventionally grown, right? So it's all going to be organic. And we see how much more expensive organic is than conventional. That's probably going to go up even more because now it's the only one that's available. Like, how are people going to be willing to pay for that?
Mm-hmm. They're not.
And again, government subsidies can help. They can potentially offset some of that cost difference that the farmer ultimately would have to shoulder, and that's an option, sure, if that would actually happen. But if that were going to happen, wouldn't that happen already?
Yeah, and it's all right. The reason we have the crops the way we do is because it creates a bigger yield, more money for everyone. And then what products is it funding the production of, right?
Yeah,
A lot
it's
of
more, yeah,
corn-based supplement, or not supplements, but corn-based products.
yeah. Which, by the way, is because corn farmers are getting those subsidies. That's why high fructose corn syrup is everywhere. That's why corn is being fermented into ethanol and now being put into 10% of our gas.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you factor in the money that they're getting, it does make the gas cheaper to manufacture when you just put 10% ethanol in it.
Yeah, like you can very quickly see why, I don't want to say unfortunately, but why it won't, a lot of this won't change. It turns political because people go, "Oh, I'm gonna do blah blah blah," and it's like, okay, so did someone else said something equivalent to that 40 years ago, and we're in no different position.
Yeah. It was said 40 years ago, it was said 30, it was said 20, it was said 10, it was said 5. None of those changes actually changed anything. So at this point, I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, well, what's really gonna change this time? And we're looking at one piece of the puzzle. We're not looking at its overall effect to not just individual health, but just the way it's going to overall affect the entire economy. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you try to make big changes like this, all these other things that need to shift to make this work, assuming that it even gets close to working, or the whole thing collapses.
I think the initial idea is attractive, but it's not something that's going to change quickly.
Yeah. And I really think if it had a chance of working, that's the only way to do it, is to do it slowly. So you can't just wake up, right? When is inauguration day? January 20th or 21st, somewhere around there. So you can't just wake up on the 22nd and be like, boom, we're changing all of this.
Yeah, there's too many cogs spinning to just remove one and call it good.
Yeah.
So
It'll take And that's a play off of your point. One, it'll probably take like 5-10 years just to smoothly transition all this stuff. And then another 5-10 years just to see if it actually works. And then now we're in the 10-20 year mark. That's assuming nothing else gets changed.
Which there's no guarantee.
Which you're probably going to have change happen in those first 5-10 years before things even get fully rolled out. Something's going to get rolled back, or we're going to have some new bad guy that takes the center stage instead, and we'll stop caring about seed oils and we'll start caring about I don't know, the state the flower comes from. I don't know.
I love it. All right, keep rolling. One of the big things we discussed was like food dyes, additives, chemicals. So, banning harmful chemicals in food production. So, we kind of talked on it a little bit before, but like pesticides, other chemicals that are believed to have adverse effects on our health. You could probably put in plastics in there too. There's been a lot of new studies finding microplastic in people's arteries, finding microplastics in people's brains. Again, I'm assuming that's probably in arteries, vasculature. I could be wrong, but things like that. So setting higher standards, right? We look at the United States compared to other countries and what they allow to be used. It's funny too, because I was listening to the RFK Health Roundtable. It's like 3.5 hours long. Did not make it all the way through, if I'm being honest. But one of the things they talked about was that a lot of our pesticides that we use in the States are actually produced in Europe, but they're not legal. They're not able to be legally used in Europe because like everything is an absolute no-go. So super interesting. And then also too is like the US allows for so many different chemicals, and they'll allow certain chemicals before they're even proven to be safe or not. I don't know. Like I don't know enough about it to speak to that, but there's like a lot of that where it's like, well, let's just wait to see what happens, and then we'll take it out.
I mean, we could, to really hit a third row, we can talk about the vaccine.
I'm in.
For things that were pushed out before they were proven safe. But I'm not going to do that because that's going to be a long episode. That's going to be another episode probably at some point. But something I want to take umbrage with is people always say, not always. I need to get away from the habit of saying always. But people say, and they point to Europe as like, oh, Europe's healthy. We should just do what Europe does. Like they ban these chemicals and ingredients. Europe is 59% overweight or obese. They're actually worse than us. So should we follow their example?
We don't have proof that we should.
So if anything, they're showing us a model of what not to do because they're worse off than us. Mm-hmm. So maybe is that really the model you wanna point to?
I think we're noticing that there's health trends worldwide that are being affected just in general. So and I know we're straying far from chemicals, but you look at things like technology, you look at food production, food availability, and I would argue movement activity is at the base of a lot of this.
Yes. One of the things that hung around for the longest time that I haven't heard about in a few years, which is good and bad, is the whole blue zone thing, right? It's these areas around the world where people live to be the highest age. And so people would go, well, let's just eat the way they eat. And that's kind of where the Mediterranean diet came from, and a lot of those types of diets came from blue zones, right? Okinawa is another one. And so people will start eating the way they eat. But something that always caught my eye was even if people eat the way that they ate, they never really talked about moving the way they moved. And so magically, when you take that Mediterranean diet out of the Mediterranean, and you apply it to the US, it doesn't really have the same effect. It's almost like you only took half the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Energy balance matters a lot.
Weird. Weird. That's so weird.
So one of so we like extended family, soon to be extended family. Ellen's um, brother-in-law's brother and his partner live in Canada. And one of the things I remember, we posted something and he commented, but it was just like he's like, you don't realize like how walkable Canada and Europe are. They're small, like the way they set up their city centers is more advantageous for people to go by foot or go by bicycle.
It's
Where
actually inconvenient to have a vehicle in a lot of places because it's so
yes,
small and compact.
yes. So you like think of I would the thing I always remember because like growing up was like Germany fits inside of Wisconsin. Like
Most of Europe fits in Texas.
you're right, right. Like you have to realize like the size of this. So it's like they don't have the expanse like that we have. Where yeah, we have to drive a couple miles to get XYZ, but there's a lot of people in other countries that can walk half a mile to go to the grocery store, and they go 4 times a week because
Because
there's
the way that
the
because the way they solve the way they solve the shelf life issue with produce is they just go multiple times a week.
yeah, which we can too, but it's a 15-minute drive, you know, one way. So it's an inconvenience. It's
Plus,
it
most produce that I've bought has typically lasted 5 to 7 days.
agree.
So like once a week,
Yeah.
that's 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 too often to go to a grocery store.
Mhm.
And if it is, cool, buy frozen fruit, buy canned fruit, buy a ton of canned fruit, a ton of frozen fruit, or buy fresh fruit and freeze it. You'll get the exact same effect as pre-frozen fruit anyway, and just do it that way.
Yeah. So we talked about too is like the farming switch. Sorry, I'm just bringing us back a little bit, but the farming, like looking at more sustainable agriculture and is it going organic and what's being sprayed, it's like there's there's different options to pesticides and chemicals to be used. Part of the pesticide thing is like the yields are going to change, which will
Drastically.
vastly change the price tag on things would vastly like it's just like you get how that goes up the chain, right? The cost just went up big time. The chemical that you maybe want to spray, maybe it's cheaper, but how much do you have to spray? Is it more or less? How effective is it? More or less? Okay, great. How much did we yield? Is it more or less? How much do we now have to pay? So like we've already covered some of this. So it's like I know that's part of it. Can we use different chemicals? But I think in some other like ultra processed foods as well as like with technology ever advancing, we're finding weird compounds that do XYZ. And again, they'll be like, oh, it works. This is how we hold the chocolate on your Milky Way stable. We're
Yeah,
going to put this. And then we don't know that it does anything for 5 to 10 years when they're like, oh shit, we can find it
at
in their
minimum.
brain. It's like in their brain and it's not good. There's multiple, it's like creating cancerous cells. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
we gotta pull that chemical. And it's again, there's so much that's out of the average person's control because a company is looking for a way to make it faster, make it more efficient, make it more profitable. So we're the weird guinea pigs that, it comes down to what foods are you going to choose more of to expose yourself less to certain chemicals to the like to like the most I can't think of the word, but like to your like to the best of your ability to not expose yourself to these ultra processed foods. Is one Milky Way with that weird I'm just again made this chemical up, but this weird chocolate chemical, is it going to kill you if you have one of them? No. Like,
probably not.
is it going to take 20 weeks off your life? I don't know, but probably not. So it's just knowing it's like, okay, if I'm eating whole foods from sources that I can more easily guarantee that are higher quality, that's the best you can do. And
Yeah,
then move your body enough so that you're in a realm of health. So again, like baseline, I agree with removing some chemicals, but it's also what are the foods you're putting in your mouth, and
But
what
I
the
also,
quantity and frequency.
yes, exactly that. So I have this theory that I've not really tested very much because this is a relatively new theory. But on the point of the chemicals and removing them, we know that in pretty much any case, it's the dose that makes the poison, right? It's how much of a thing you have that will lead to your untimely death, because you can have enough water to kill you. So does that mean we should get rid of water because it's a hazardous chemical?
Yes.
So moving down to any of the other supposedly harmful chemicals, is it the chemical that's harmful, or is it the amount?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there
Yeah.
are all these studies that show acting is supposedly terrible for you, but when you look into the research, one, you find out that they were on rats instead of humans, so that's a huge strike. But even if we look past that, let's just look past that and we'll just say that the rat's body and the human's body is exactly 100% accurate, which they're close. That's why they use them in a lot of studies, but there are still differences. But let's assume it's completely 1-to-1, it's 100%. When you factor out for size difference between a rat and a human, the amount of aspartame they were feeding these rats, you're basically looking at, what was it, like 18 cans worth of soda every day.
Yeah,
So if you're
I don't want to say unrealistic because I know some people that put down soda,
there
but
are some, there's very
but
few.
that's like a wildly unrealistic amount.
Yeah. Is it possible to drink that much? Sure. Just like it's possible to drink enough water to kill you. That number for how much water to kill you is actually, I think, less than the amount of Diet Coke you would need to drink to have those long-term cancerous effects from the aspartame.
Was it like
So what's
hydrolysis or something?
what's really the more deadly chemical?
Mm,
Because the aspartame will just cut years off your life. The water will kill you.
right. And that's most studies. There was something about rice having anti-nutrients or something.
Yeah, that's the brown rice thing. It's the phytic acid in the husk that makes it
How
bind to
many
nutrients so you don't
pounds?
absorb it.
How many pounds you would have to eat for there to be like a truly negative side effect from that before it was like something else? Like
Right.
aside from the quantity, the volume alone, like it's dumb, and then people run with it.
So
Same
my theory,
with seed oils.
yeah. So my theory is that all of these vilified chemicals are fine because when they were introduced into the market, they were assumed to be eaten in such small quantities
Mhm.
that we'd never really get to feeling those ill effects. And so now they've simply been run away with. And I don't even think they're necessarily being used in those high quantities. I think they're just being consumed in those high quantities because people, and this will be a conversation for another day, but because people don't listen to the fact, and rightfully so, quite honestly, that a serving of Oreos is 2 cookies.
If they're not double stuff, it's 3.
Yeah, it's 3 if it's normal, 2 if it's double stuff. It's a ridiculously small serving size regardless, but and the reason I say this is a conversation for a different day is because those foods are obviously, maybe not obviously to some people, but they're engineered to make you want to eat more and more and more of them.
Mhm.
And so that's the topic for another day. But when, so like technically if you ate them as labeled, be fine, because in 2 or 3 cookies you're not going to have enough of whatever the chemical is.
Right.
But when you entire pack, now it's
Your
a different
exposure is a
story.
lot higher.
Yeah.
No, that is a good point. That the amount probably hasn't changed, but people's their frequency and quantity of consumption has
And I
increased for one reason or another.
and I say this because I've made none of these changes to my diet ever. Not ever, because I've experimented with diets, but not because I thought they were magic. But I mean, I'm at a point now where I don't look for seed oils. I don't look for red dyes. I don't look for salt or anything like that. I track my calories and I exercise and I wrestle. I'm fairly active. So either, and I'm willing to take either theory. I'm willing to go with either. Either I'm a freaking superhero, or, which is probably not me because I'm not the one on this that looks like Henry Cavill. So it's either the superhero or I know something that other people don't, or I'm doing things differently than other people are. And if I'm doing things differently than other people are, maybe I should do something where I lay out my method and see if people try it and see how they fare with it. Oh, wait, I do that. And oh, wait, those people that do follow do have pretty much the same outcome, scaled appropriately based off of their adherence level.
Yeah.
Because when Gabe started with me in January and he followed the exact same method of just track protein calories, he lost 40 pounds in 5 months.
Yeah.
He didn't care about seed oils. He didn't care about dyes.
I'll say the same thing. I just had my client Ryan, almost 40 pounds in about the same timeline.
All he did was track his calories, go to the gym 3 times a week. That's it.
Yeah. I think it's the latter. I think it's the doing differently than the majority.
I really want it to be the superhero thing, though.
It'd be a good Black Adam.
I hated that movie.
It wasn't good. It
was such a bad movie.
Black Panther. I'm just picking on the black characters.
Black Panther would be dope to be. That'd be a lot more fun.
Wasn't there like Iron something?
There's Iron Man. It's not really a superhero.
No, not Iron Man. No.
Still a great character, but just not a superhero by definition.
Wasn't the Green Lantern originally a black guy? Am I crazy?
I mean, there were many Green Lanterns or many lanterns. I don't know.
Oh, you're right, because it was like
it's like a society.
Yeah, it was like Superman. Like he's not alone. There's other people like him. He's just the only one.
It's okay. Like
Got it. Bunch of lanterns. Beautiful.
It's a whole lantern festival. That's what you call a group of lanterns. A festival.
A festival. There's a festival of lanterns. Okay, let's keep going. So there's a big promotion of food as medicine or as an alternative. That was one thing in the round table that they brought out pretty early on. And of course they had Jordan Peterson and his daughter, I believe, there. It's really interesting though to see these like social media influencers at something like this. I don't hate it. I don't know that it's really changed that much over time, right? Because maybe in the past they would have just brought
in celebrities before. Now it's just social media celebrities. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's all rigged too. This is all a show. People have to respect that too.
No way.
Like, oh, who's gonna be the victim and what's the savior and what's the Pocahontas story? Like that's the route they always take. But people are naive enough to believe that just because the characters change, so did the story. Anyway,
like Pocahontas wasn't the exact same story as Avatar.
I love Avatar. Pocahontas.
I love Avatar too, but like it's Pocahontas. Just the only difference is instead of dark skin, they had blue skin.
Yeah, way better storyline, honestly. Way better CGI too. So, excuse me, but one of the things that they talked about was, and again, I think it was Jordan Peterson's daughter, not entirely sure, but on a bunch of meds and pain meds and stuff for all these gut and health issues, autoimmune issues, and she decided to do like straight carnivore or keto and solved a lot of problems.
Yeah, that was Michaela Peterson. That's her. That's yeah.
Okay. I don't know who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden they brought on Jordan. They were sitting next to each other, and then he made my daughter comment. And I was like, oh, didn't know. Shows how much I'm on social media, but yeah, so it's interesting. So they promoted that, and she did a little plug for her business, yada yada. But it was just they brought up the point of like a lot of the times healthcare is going to look for meds to solve a problem because that's what they're educated on. And then they had another doctor on and her talking about how it's like their nutrition section in how many of their years of schooling was like 2 days. 2
Oh,
days,
they've expanded it to 2 days. That's
a week,
cool.
right?
They've
It's like
added.
2 days to like it was a very small section.
I thought it was 8 hours for a while.
Like I just can't. That's just talk about frustrating because you think of like oversimplified. What are the things that make the cells in your body? Food. So if you have poorer quality food coming in at a regular basis at a high quantity, and you're underactive and you're under muscled, the likelihood of you having health issues is high. Like your body is not being supported well and it's not able to build what it needs to build in order to support itself. Crazy concept. But then they come at it with have medications. And right, I think there's a place for medications 100%. But
Yeah, for like acute things and acute care, like
yes. Yeah.
Western medicine all day cannot be touched.
Crushes, but long-term sustainability. Again, I don't know enough to be like, it's this, but it's like if we can't, you can agree that if we moved more, ate more appropriately, had a little bit more education, we would have healthier people because there are people like you and I that do differently than the majority, and our health markers, our strength, our mental health, all of these things are in a much better position. And if we did like a long-term study on us, our predicted outcomes would be much more positive than the other people and much less medicated than the other people because we're turning to things that promote health and wellness. So they're looking to bring in food as medicine type programs, which I'm not against.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it.
The whole thing is like, how do we reduce chronic disease, lower healthcare costs, and it's like the idea of like preventative nutrition, which is phenomenal. I think it's great.
See, the issue that I have is in that roundtable because you have them talking about this food as medicine initiative, which again, like everything else, all their other points on paper sounds great. And then you have Michaela Peterson come on and talk about her experience with her nutrition and how she fixed everything in her gut by switching to carnivore. So where do you think that's going to ultimately shift when you stick those two ideas side by side?
That carbs are bad.
Yes.
That fats are bad. That
And
vegetables
that's
are potentially
not fats, because if you're on carnivore, you're having lots of steak and bacon and eggs. So fat's not off the table. But it's gonna lead back to the conversation of, okay, well, we just get rid of carbs. I mean, it's not that it won't work, but it's not properly identifying the culprit. Because what we don't know is, and information might be out there, I just don't follow her very much. But what was she eating before?
Yeah, she didn't speak to that at all.
Really weird.
Mm-hmm. And it's and you go, oh, she's Jordan Peterson's blah, blah. It's like Jordan Peterson has been an author of other things before he dove into health. So we can't work under the assumption that he had his shit together when she was under the age of 12.
Yeah.
Like we don't know that. So that is a really, really good point because we don't know what their lifestyle could have been completely different than
That's always my initial thought when people switch to a diet, a very rigid diet, and all of a sudden things improve for them. It's like, one, great, I'm glad it improved, but that doesn't mean that whatever X thing you just cut out was necessarily bad. Was it also that now that you're focused on health, you're probably not drinking as much alcohol, if any?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know that has tons of negative side effects in the body, both short and long term. Like that's irrefutable. But we're not banning that. We're not talking about that. That's weird. Like there's not a single positive. But that's weird. But you can still just walk down the street and buy some.
Yeah.
But hey, let's just pull out another food coloring. That'll solve the issue.
I was kind of peeved that they brought that up. I think it's a good example. But then it was like she plugged her business. So like that's what bugged me, because then it's just like, oh well, come over here. I can
Yeah.
help you. Again, it's another like potentially short-term fix, because keto is not the solution for everyone. And obviously, like the hope is that she gives really good guidance. It's affordable, so they can help a lot of people. But is it sustainable?
It's if it's going to be a carnivore based approach, which if she's stemming from her history, it probably will be. It's going to create more fear and anxiety around carbs,
Right.
and that's not helpful to anybody.
No, because most people, I always ask that question to clients. I'm like, do you like, because almost everyone will be like, oh, I just low carb, blah, blah, because I feel better that way. I'm like, what carbs are you eating? "Oh, I don't want to eat carbs." I was like, okay, but do you agree that you're going to have carbs again in the next year, in the next 10 years? Can you list off just 5 to 10 of those that you know you're going to want to have? Do you have some level of anxiety or regret after consuming them? And the answer is usually like, yeah. I'm like, okay, why is that? Oh, because I always gain weight when I have like, okay, but do you? Like, do you understand how they play a role into your performance, your body composition, your health, your mental state? Like, these are the things you and I help people with, is not being fearful of something that because they don't understand it. I think one of the coolest things is taking someone who like, I, one of my clients was one of them. He's like, carbs were freaky. I'm like, cool, let's keep them in. Let's see what happens. All of a sudden, he starts losing weight, eating more food.
Yeah.
Or while he's on his deficit, he never went below like 250 carbs. Like all of a sudden, he's like, I see it. Like I understand it. It wasn't the food. It was me and my beliefs.
Yeah, it was the amount. That's
And where was it coming from? Right? It's always coming from dog shit, like gas station food.
yeah.
It's also paired with other dog shit food, like again, it's that high calorie, low nutrient density. So there's promoting food as medicine, I think overall is a positive, and I hope I hope the system changes, the education system changes in a way that it's like a much bigger section. But the other thing too is like big medicine doctors, they make their money from prescriptions, a lot of money from giving prescriptions. So they're more incentivized to say, hey, Tony, you got a belly, take these pills, it'll help.
I'll
Rather
be
like, hey, Tony, what's your daily step count? Let's see if through insurance we can get you a Fitbit to blah, blah, blah. And they might do that. But it's like there's more accountability needed and there's more structure needed in order to say, hey, Tony, we need you to get 7,000 to 10,000 steps per day. And, if you're drinking, back off and try to eat at home for 2 meals more out of the week than you already are.
yeah. I'll be on board with the food as medicine idea if they start talking about protein.
Oh, but my kidneys, they already hurt.
Great. They can talk about that too.
It's bullshit.
Yeah, they can talk about how it's bullshit. If they start talking about that, because I've seen it in myself and clients and athletes that I follow. If they injure something, and even this goes even down all the way to like they tear a muscle, they have to get surgery. If they have a high protein diet, they recover faster. So the food is having a, by definition, medicinal effect on the body.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because we wouldn't call it medicinal if we didn't have medicine. It would just be what happens.
Yeah, it would
Maybe
just be
a
like,
door
yeah,
saying
that's
that,
just the
but
thing.
yeah, it's just your body doing its normal operations. It's doing what it's supposed to.
You mean when you damage tissue and then you provide the body with what it needs to make more tissue, it can make more tissue faster, more effectively?
Yes, Tony.
That's so weird.
It's like having a construction crew with knowledgeable people and all the tools they need, and they're on time. things happen much more quickly.
That's
And if
so
you've got
weird.
the guy who, is unfortunately missing an arm and a leg, doesn't have his tools. Oh, and there's 4 of those guys on a 10-man crew. Like, it's gonna take longer and you're gonna be more aggravated.
Yeah.
Sorry to the single leg, single armed construction workers. But yes. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's see.
Next one is, what's next on the list is health inequities. So it's discussing efforts to make nutritious foods accessible to underserved communities through urban agriculture subsidies and other initiatives.
I think this is a really cool topic. Again, it's another one that it takes time to go into effect. Right, because the amount of food, right, food deserts, it's because there's a lot of like convenience stores in cities where people don't have the ability, kind of like we were talking about, like Europe, Canada, walkable to get whole foods, real food. And the food deserts is like you can get juice, alcohol, water, and highly processed foods. Low protein, little to, I mean, probably no vegetables. And
Yeah.
that's a hard thing. So it is cool to see like the urban agriculture movements where there's, city gardens and stuff like that, where you can come participate, learn, go home with some produce. And they're usually really, really good about the education piece,
Yeah.
because oftentimes it's people that maybe grew up in those urban settings and lived through that desert, left and found out there's a whole new world. So they bring that back to those communities that are underserved, and it's usually like a really cool community program. So I think that would be like, to have more of those would be incredible.
Yeah. That would be good to see. Yeah, yeah. I got no fire for that one.
It's
It's another one that, like all the other ones, it does sound good on paper. I don't really see any potential issues with it. Although I mean, my only sticking point is the whole subsidy issues. I'm like, well, where's that money coming from? Because it's got to come from somewhere, right? So there's spending involved with that. Two, this is something that's been talked about through several administrations at this point, presidential administrations. So what's been the issue before that's prevented it from happening, and from happening at a large scale, because it is happening at a very small scale. But if it's already happening at a small scale, that means it's happening independently of the Maha movement. So it's already starting to take root. Great. So then, is the idea for this just to come in and sort of add gasoline to that fire and just help it flourish? Because that could be fantastic. Or are they going to come in and say, hey, no, you're doing it wrong, you got to do it our way? So I know you've started something, stop that, tear it all down. We have to start back from square zero, which now is going to take 5-10 years to re-implement, when you guys already had something small scale but growing in place.
I think it would seem idiotic to come in and try to wipe the whole system. I would rather support what's already started.
It would also seem idiotic to tell people they can't go outside, but they can go buy alcohol.
Don't go to the gym,
But
you can go buy alcohol and hang out in your house.
you can go buy alcohol.
We'll have a bat flu soup call.
Don't do the thing that can improve your health, but go buy the thing that will absolutely make it worse.
Increase depression.
In this time where we really want, where we say we want your health to be as tip top as possible.
Brutal. I think it's just a reflection of
that's where I look at these things and I'm like, great, sounds awesome on paper. Your history, as in the history of governmental policy, shows that you either won't do it or will do it absolutely terribly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. The bigger picture, Tony. Um, we've talked about this a lot, but understanding caloric intake and caloric expenditure and getting regular movement in, how these are extremely important and the basis for weight management. Um, and if someone is obese or overweight, right, very similar terminology, they are consuming more energy than they expend. Where if it was at more of a balance, their body composition, their health would be different. If it were in more of like a negative balance, like they were consuming fewer calories than they expend, um, they would be losing weight and at the other end of the spectrum. So we've talked about this how many times now, but one of the big things in that round table is like metabolic health and things like that. But it comes down to energy balance over time and food quantity and food quality, where it's not just about avoiding certain chemicals. It's not just about avoiding certain food additives. Because like we said, we both could still eat Oreos and Chipotle and McDonald's every day and lose weight because we have a certain skill set and knowledge base, where a lot of other people, they don't. Um, but I think that the big thing is caloric management, energy management, in and out. So looking at things like strength training, walking, the things that are free.
Yeah.
But it's
You don't need an expensive trip. You don't need to buy the expensive food. You don't people always talk about food quality and food quantity. Even Jack does, and I'm slowly wearing him down to at least a reasonable level because I'm not on board with the quality part. I'm almost 100% on food quantity. The only leeway I have for food quality is because of its effect on feeling full, on how much it might impact mood, but really that's more an effect of the composition of your meals, not even necessarily the quality. Because you can have quote unquote crap food, and if you legitimately have it with protein beforehand, we've seen scientifically that it's any sort of blood sugar response. So right off the bat, that nullifies the satiety response argument, that nullifies the mood balance argument, that nullifies a whole lot of it. And if you really want to see some fun stuff, you go to the Google machine and you just type in the Twinkie diet, and you see a professor that ate nothing but Twinkies, protein shakes, and multivitamins and lost 27 pounds.
mm-hmm.
And blood markers improved across the board. So more and more, I like the food quality thing loses weight with me because it's just. And I used to subscribe to it more because I'm like, well, I'm a coach, and that's sort of what we're taught, and that's what all the certifications say, and that's true. It's what I say. There's still something there, I'm sure. So I won't ever be 0% on food quality, but I just think it's massively overblown.
I think it's overblown. The reason why I use it is because I think for a lot of people, in a sense, it's what they want to hear, but then it's also giving them an actionable item to follow through upon.
But there's
So,
also a lot of people that just want to hear that it's healthy to be fat.
right.
So at what point are we just giving them information that they want just to make them feel better versus giving them the information they need because that's what's actually going to be worth focusing on?
But it's going to be backed with balance and allowing the ultra processed foods in and having a general understanding. It's just working off of, like, for the most part, we want to keep food quality higher. We want to stay further away from super processed foods for the most part. That's where I'm at. And like, I'm all on board for Oreo o'clock. I'm all on board for, hitting the gas station pizza up. Like, you can make it work. As soon as you start seeing negative effects potentially from those things, that's when it's like, okay, let's look at your quantity, quality, and frequency. and let's evaluate those
You
segments.
can this is the one area you can make it work to the degree that you're willing to be meticulous about your tracking.
Mhm.
Because if you are not, if you're one of these that thinks you can do intuitive eating without having any idea of how much you're actually eating and how it actually makes you feel,
It's my favorite.
then it's not going to work for you, because you're going to be massively overeating food, which most likely means you're not eating enough protein, which means now you're susceptible to feeling hungry all the time, and you're susceptible to those mood swings. If you actually balance out the rest of your diet, because you're not really getting protein in a low quality package, you're not getting sufficient protein in low quality packages. If you're getting enough protein, you're typically eating some good quality food to get that. And so if you are doing that, you're almost entirely taking care of the food quality side right there alone.
Yes. No, I'm with you. I think something people like extremes because there's, for some reason, like there's certainty to extremes. So you'll see people on one end or the other. Is it convenience? Is it the quote unquote quality of the food? Like, what do they want? What do they want to lean on? Whose boat do they want to jump on? What side do they want to be?
Yeah, well, the certainty that people might want to consider is that on all these fad diets, you have a 95% chance of failure or relapse. So you're almost certain to fall off the wagon.
Yeah. Instead of involving the things that you do want and learning how to work them in more responsibly.
Yeah, I mean, just get your protein in, go exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, pick up some weights.
Please. Then put them down and then pick them up and then put them down and do that a lot.
Yeah. I like, I mean, I've seen it with my clients. I've seen it with myself through the years. Like, that's, if you really want to simplify it and make it as boiled down and bulletproof as possible, to eat protein, lift weights.
Mm-hmm. I'm in. You got me. You put that under a box with a stick and a string, you'll catch me.
Yeah, just like that's it.
So yeah,
all the other stuff is they're just whatevers.
It's the small daily habits is what needs to be in line. And if you're not where you want to be, your small daily habits are probably out of line for where you think or want to be. Yeah, kind of like
and if you think you're in a calorie deficit, you're not losing weight or you're gaining weight,
you're not.
Guess what? Yeah, you're not in a calorie deficit. I don't care what the calculator says. You need to adjust your calories, because any calculator is at best going to give you a starting point. You will still need to spend some time meaning weeks, adjusting and refining that number to your specific lifestyle. So if the calorie calculator said 2,600 and you've meticulously held to 2,600 calories and the scale is not budging, you need to move to 24. I don't care what the calculator said. The calculator got you close because it actually got you to maintenance.
Yep.
Now you just need to make a small tweak and you'll be off to the races.
Yeah, so that overarching is caloric management, which
caloric
is not
management and activity management. That's it.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. It's not difficult to understand. It's the application and the habit change that most people struggle with.
But it's so weird because, and again, this is, I think, what we were talking about, what we were texting about the other day. I don't know if it's like the L-carnitine or the age, but it's so weird that people will say that they don't have time to eat healthy in order to lose weight, when the solution to losing weight is to eat less. So the solution is to actually spend less time eating. So what do you mean you don't have time to eat less to lose weight? When you eat less, you spend less time eating. It doesn't add up.
It's fun to say, though.
It's super fun to say because we live in a society where people will be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You don't have time to eat. You can just stay 300 pounds. Skip a meal. Now you'll have time to go to the grocery store and get better food.
That takes work. I don't know what to get.
Go to Walmart, they'll deliver the groceries to you.
I know.
Send me a DM, I will make you a grocery list.
There's a fee though. There's a fee.
I will do that for free. I will for free make you a grocery list.
I'm gonna charge you a fee.
Jack's gonna charge you a fee, but I will do it for free.
I'm a business.
That's why I'm the superhero.
Wow. I feel like the Joker. All right, so I think one of the big things we gotta come back to is all of these proposals are they're being brought to the table with a positive intent of change, because what, like 50% of adults, 50% of children are overweight or obese, and numbers continue to get worse. Diabetes cases, like, dude, like almost 50% are like people are pre-diabetic. So it is pre-diabetic or diabetic. I think it's like 49 or 50%, which is crazy. Which again,
what's actually crazy about that is that's a statistic, right?
yes.
And so in order for it to be a statistic, people have to have reported that they're in fact pre-diabetic or diabetic. So, okay, cool. Exactly. It's way higher because how many people are walking around pre-diabetic and diabetic and they just don't know yet because they haven't had their numbers tested, because they haven't had an adverse health effect yet.
Right. Or adverse enough that they're concerned.
Correct. Because what's really going on is they do have some adverse health effects, but they're chalking it up to old age because that's what society says is supposed to happen when you hit 35 is, yeah, your circulation is supposed to get a little worse.
So this is something I had brought up in the past because I was partnered with Organic Valley for a period of time. So I got a glimpse of the corporate wellness world, and it was gross. They do, the specific company and others are different. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to bash Organic Valley, but their health stats were abysmal. Like 70% of their people were overweight or obese, high blood pressure. I can't remember, there's some other stat too, but you can go in for a free health check. They'll do blood pressure, blood glucose. I think they do circumferences and body weight. And then they basically incentivize you to go to the doctor. And the company itself can't help its insurance claims, and it can't help its insurance rates unless a claim is made. So someone, just because Marshfield Clinic came in to run these, the quick tests, nothing comes of it until they go to the hospital and a claim is made on insurance, and then it's recorded. So Healthy Tony goes in, great. Fat Jack goes in and gets, a really bad workup. It's just, the system's interesting. And they only do it once a year, so you might not catch someone every year. And that was one of those things, like what I wanted to do, and I got the instant no, was like, can we fund them coming in twice per year? We get people into a program where exercise is provided for them, accountability is provided to them, check-ins are provided to them, and we talk about what's in the kitchen. I was working with one of the lead in the kitchen about food and like the changes that she wanted to make, but the executives didn't want to make. And I was like, but you guys are all this like health forward, and a bunch of companies are like this too. And they won't make these changes for whatever reason.
Because it costs money. That's all it comes down to. Again, they're a business.
But like, I know, but it's just like, I'm like, what if you got your health measurements 2 times per year? Even if it's people that care, so we can see improvement in body weight and health markers, right? 2 times per year, we can see that. We could track that ourselves. The company, that's what I wanted to do. We could track that, and then we could take it to the insurance company and say, hey, look at this program. Can we get incentives, subsidies for different things to do this, or reduction in our rate because we're making these impacts? And they're going to go, no, blah, blah, blah. You got to get more of these people. It's like, okay, then we target the overweight and obese people, and then we collect data on that. But no, we can't do anything like that because it has to go through insurance. Their claim has to be made. So if a claim's not made, you make no progress. You get a shit report card. And then rates go up. And then people get worse insurance offered to them. So it's just like, that's like an inside look at a billion-dollar company. Again, every business is different. I'm not trying to shit talk, but it's just like realizing like the proposals that he's making are with positive intent, but there's so many different operations in place that it makes it really difficult to do all of these things. So just like, a presidential candidate is going to blow smoke up your ass until your eyes go gray. There's no promise that any of this is going to go into action. There's no promise that any of this is going to happen. There's no promise that what they promise is even going to get started, because it has to go through so many checks and balances, an old system, old ass, unhealthy people that could give a shit except for the money that hits their wallet.
Yeah. Yeah. It still has to go through, what is it, 535 people? Something like that? In the House and the Senate?
That don't know shit about food, but they eat shit food every day, and they're
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I like, one of the notes that we have here is just like, it's the big rocks. It's the finding the balance that works. It's finding the activity that works. It's sticking to mostly whole foods. It's understanding how food works. It's understanding your habits, how they serve you or they don't serve you in your goals. So overall, I think it's positive. How much of it is going to work? How much of it is actually going to change health outcomes positively? We don't know.
I'm gonna say 1%. And that's if it makes it all the way through the system and actually becomes acted upon.
If.
Because everybody, so Chat GPT is taken over, right? It's taken over Google. It's gonna very quickly become the #1 search engine, take over Google. And all you have to do is just ask it a question, and it will go and it will search the internet and it will aggregate all the information and provide a result. You could go to Chat GPT and say, what's the most effective way that I can eat to improve my health? And somewhere early on, because it's aggregating all the information out there, somewhere early on, it's going to mention protein. And so then if you continue your conversation with ChatGPT, you can dive deep into the protein. Jack's going to try it right now because I'm actually real curious if it does come up. And somewhere you can go, and I tried this last night, this next part, where I went and I did a little research and I asked for some of the top nutrition researchers. It gave me a list. One of the people on that list was Dr. Alan Aragon, who's fantastic when it comes to all things nutrition. So then you phrase the question sort of pointedly, but not really towards a specific outcome. But you go, according to Alan Aragon's recommendations, this is the exact question I asked. What are his recommendations when it comes to protein amount and protein timing? And I got this big, like 6-paragraph blurb about this is what he's found according to these research studies, that it shows this much protein, and it doesn't really matter what time it is. What's more important is just getting it in over the course of the day. And it talked about how the post-workout window is not 60 minutes. It's actually more like 2 to 4 hours after your workout. So it even addressed that. So it even debunked a myth right away. And it addressed everything. And I didn't have to point it down like, is it true that this is the right protein amount? Just asked it, what is the right protein amount? And it did all the work for me. And then if you want to, you can still go and do your own independent research on top of that, which is, I'd still recommend, but it went and did all the research for me.
So for shits and giggles, I went over to ChatGPT. The other thing you have to consider is that it knows too much about me. So it like, I posed it as, let's see, what's the best way to improve my health, weight, blood markers if I were 100 pounds overweight, right? I could make a much longer one and it might be more precise. But comes up with start with mindset and goals, clear, achievable goals, start with small, measurable milestones, focus on health and overall Focus on health over perfection, aiming for continual progress, not an all or nothing mentality. Second was prioritize nutrition, whole foods, minimally processed, control portions without over restricting. Bingo. And then it's just saying to monitor your highly processed foods, stay hydrated, build a movement routine. Again, starting small, consistent strength training, increase activity gradually, and then address sleep and stress, track and adjust, consider professional guidance. And then it goes on to say, like even small changes as much as 2 to 5 pounds can affect your blood pressure.
Sounds pretty solid.
So it lines up. I just thought that was fun. I had to look it up.
Yeah, sounds pretty solid. So that's information that's readily available to everybody. But people don't want to go find the information, because if you wanted to find the information, it's there. And it was there back in, like it's gone already. But it was there when Google was the top search engine. It was there when Yahoo was the top search engine for that 38 minutes. It was there. The information's been there the whole time. It's been tested, updated, shifted, yes, as research happens. But the general information has been there. So is it an education issue? I think it's more of a social issue. I think we're not, I don't even know if I want to figure out how to say this nicely. We don't bully people enough. We don't shame people enough. Society as a whole has gotten real okay with being in terrible shape and terrible health. And until that changes, nothing changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've gotten to the point where like being normal is being fat, and overweight and unhealthy and on X amount of medications. Like
that's the average. Like now people make it a point to flaunt how many medications they're on. Which, to be fair, there's a significant percentage of people in fitness that also flaunt how many supplements they take every day.
Which is hilarious.
So to be fair, like it's not like just jumping into the fitness pool is automatically the answer either. But again, those supplements don't necessarily fall in line with what ChatGPT just told you to do.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't say anything about supplements. It said whole, minimally processed foods, gradual increase in exercise, focus on health instead of perfection.
It's like it's right in front of you.
Yeah. And every once in a while you'll come across a story of somebody that says they got bullied or they got shamed about their bodies, and that actually lit the fire under them to get them to improve their health. Is shaming and bullying harsh? Sure, without question. Is it effective? Probably.
I think there's
a balance there, because obviously you can go too far with it, just like you can go too far with anything else.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a too far, and it's all too easy since it is usually verbally based. It's super easy to go too far. Yes.
Well, and think of it, it's like it's a form of honesty too. I had a conversation with a client, and it was this whole idea of like their significant other says that they want to lose weight, but my question was like, well, what are their actions? Why aren't they there? They've been trying, right? The answer is yes. I'm like, okay, so it's not working, so they're fucking wrong, right? Correct. Okay, so we need to reevaluate, because what you're doing is not working, so you are wrong. You either don't have the answers, or you're not looking in the right places, you're not taking action.
Yeah. So it's one of those where it's like, at what point do we have to look and go, okay, well maybe some tough love is necessary. Maybe some tough love is the answer, because nothing else is working. We tried the acceptance thing, that didn't work. But we tried the gentle approach, that didn't work. We tried being nice about it. That didn't work. We tried not paying attention to it. That didn't work. The only thing that's happened is it's gotten worse.
And I think people tend to get frustrated and then think there's no way out. And that's when it's like reaching out for help, finding a program that's not a quick solution is like it ultimately is going to get you better long-term results. Like no matter what, if it's someone selling a quick fix this, quick fix that, eat only supplements to lose weight, that's not the ticket. That's you trying to solve the easy way because you're not willing to confront the hard shit that you're bad at.
Yeah.
Or that you don't know better, right? Like,
and as long as we're in this bubble of not of being okay with not dealing with the hard shit, it's not going to get better.
mm-hmm. What's
where's that initiative?
What is for what is his thing, like the not radical accountability is the ultimate rebellion.
Personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion.
Yes. Yeah.
Or personal excellence.
Yes, yeah. I just but yeah, no, it's just like it's that like okay, well, to be your best, sometimes you have to ask for help because you don't have the information. So,
and sometimes you got to do hard shit. Like that's
it's what you don't. You're probably doing something that you should be doing, but you don't want to do it because you're used to what you are doing because that's what you've been doing. When what you're doing is not the thing that's going to get you where you want to be, so there's friction.
Yeah, and that's the value of reaching out for help. Like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Will this work? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just as simple as like, yes, but do this. Like, make this small tweak, and it'll become more effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I literally had that with one of my clients where we made some small tweaks and vastly different. And he reached out to me and was like, dude, he's like, since asking you for help, he's like, it took me 3 months to message you. And that was like the scariest phone call I've ever hit call on. But after the phone call, he's like, I felt so much better. And 6 months, 7 months later to this day, he's like, it's now easier for me to ask for help because I understand I don't have the answers. And if I don't have the answers, there's plenty of people that are willing to have a conversation and help.
Yeah.
It's hard. And I think it's harder for a guy. I think it's hard for anyone, but we're here. There's people. If you don't know where to go and you don't want to go to us, you can still ask us like, hey, where should I go?
Yeah. If we don't know, Jack will do this, and I know, I'll do this too. If we don't know the answer, we'll point you to somebody that does. We're not just going to lie to you just to feel good about giving you an answer. We'll give you an answer if we have it. And if not, we'll either go find it for you or we'll tell you where to go find it. Yeah. We'll put you in touch with the person that does have it.
Mm-hmm. No problem doing that. So let's wrap this up. A lot of what RFK Jr. stuff is, it's just proposing change to the current system because of the obesity rates, the diabetes rates, the other health risks that are being proposed, the other chemical implications that are coming up in health because we're using X, Y, Z. We've obviously discussed a lot of it and the intricacies there, but it's the system as a whole could probably use some change, but it's also the individual and what they're doing because like you said, is like we have proof in the past that there was nothing wrong with the food pyramid. We had good health based on standards then, and it's only gotten worse over time as far as health is concerned. So there's a level of understanding that needs to be improved upon. And I think a lot of that is going to come from personal accountability, not necessarily coming from the government to guide you, but we can't control everyone.
GPT.
Yeah. Go to chat. You don't need us.
Just play around with it. Seriously, play around with it. If you really want people to talk to and get clarity on any information, Jack's here. I'm here. Shoot us. We're more than happy to talk about it in the DMs. Hop on a call if it needs more detail. detail, no issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jack, if somebody does want to do just that, if they do want to reach out, if they do want to Sam, if they do want to get a hold of you, what way to do that?
My personal cell phone. It is not going to be shared. Facebook,
I was going
Jack
to say that's
Sullivan,
going
or
to be on the internet forever.
Instagram, modern__strength. Turbo Tony, where can you be found?
You can find me on Facebook at Tony Davis. You can find me on Instagram at Tony Davis Coaching. You can find the both of us together on YouTube at Made of Metal. And you can subscribe there to be updated as we keep pushing these lives out over there as well. If you've got any questions about anything we talked about today, anything we've talked about in the past, or something that you want to hear us talk about in the future, shoot us a DM and we'll talk about your question. Or if it's a show topic, we'll do some research, we'll put stuff together, and we'll make an episode about it. So in the meantime, if you're watching live, thank you. I think I saw something from our old pal Gabe Rodriguez. He popped in. If you're watching or listening in the future, we super appreciate you for doing that as well. And we will see you next time as we bring these episodes to you most Thursday evenings. Yeah. What else you got for him, Jack?
Toodles.
We've gone back.